everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining Coresight Conversations and Retail Legends. Today, joining Deborah Weinswig and me are Allan Ellinger, co-founder of MMG Advisors, and Gary Wassner, president and founder of Hilldun Corporation. Both of them are legends in this industry. We're so glad to have their perspective. Rather than me telling you about them, I'm going to give them each a minute to just introduce themselves. So, Allan, you want to go first?
Sure. So, Allan Ellinger, a veteran of the apparel industry. I've spent a number of years prior to starting MMG actually in the menswear industry, where I was able to gain a great deal of experience in how to manage an apparel business from every perspective. I started MMG in 1989 as a turnaround and restructuring firm 4 days before Tiananmen Square. So we actually opened our business and were immediately confronted with a dip in the economy in a very challenging financial environment. That was almost 31 years ago. Gary?
I've devoted pretty much my entire career to Hilldun. It was initially a family business where in a very different category than we're in now, but for the past 43 years, I've been here and financing and factoring now about 450 different brands, investing in the industry, the fashion industry, advising, teaching, writing. I'm immersed in this industry and very, very committed to it.
If I could just add that MMG, I didn't give you a description of what we do. We are a investment banking and strategic advisory practice, but we started MMG as a turnaround and restructuring firm out of the box in 1989. Our firm has since evolved. So our job is working within the fashion and related industries, initially turning around and restructuring fashion businesses. The business ultimately evolved to become an investment banking practice where we represent buyers and sellers of apparel and fashion-related businesses.
All right. Well, let me just kick this off with the question of the day, of the week, of the month. Have any of you, we're living in crazy times. Have you ever experienced anything like this before? You've got seasoned careers, length and breadth of experience, but this is something entirely unprecedented. Like, what do you bring to this?
It's totally unprecedented. The only similarities that I feel in the anxiety levels and stress levels that are being put on our industry is back in 1988 and 89, when the savings and loan industry had a crisis, so many of the fashion industry banks that financed and supported the brands were shutting down, literally going out of business. Mm-hmm. Unemployment rose, people weren't shopping. There was huge anxiety, but it was very specific. It wasn't global, and mm-hmm. it wasn't a health issue. So we've got both the health issues and the devastation to the economy that these health issues are causing. So yeah, it's unprecedented.
Allan?
Can I actually ask you I'm sorry, Gary, it's just so important in terms of where we all sit right now. There's so much concern in the supply chain industry over factoring. Can you just kind of, with your deep knowledge, just maybe help kind of calm our fears?
Sure. To explain what factoring is, you mean?
Well, explain it, but also where do you see the future, even in the future being like the next month or two, as it relates to being able to factor?
Sure. Well, first of all, we're in the middle between the vendors, the brands, and the retailers, and we guarantee the payments of the retailers. In a situation, an environment like this, it's very, very difficult to know what retailers are going to be left standing when this is over. In addition to that, the major retailers have changed the terms in which they pay their vendors, added on months to when they're going to pay for existing invoices. It's hurt the cash flow of all of the vendors to the point where they have no revenues coming in. They depend upon their retailers to create cash flow for themselves. And not being paid and not being able to ship has been devastating. So the fact of being in the middle, we're determining the creditworthiness of the retailer, and at the same time, we're collecting all of the invoicing that has been shipped previously and approving them for the future. So we're communicating with the brands on a daily basis and the retailers on a daily basis.
So while we're on the subject, do you mind if I ask Gary a quick question?
Yeah.
So Gary, how are you handling the formulas where if you're lending 85% against receivables or 50% against inventory, and you now have a receivable base that's plunging because vendors are not getting paid,
Great
and
question.
very inventory not being shipped? How are you handling it?
Well, for the most part, we know our clients well. We're a very personalized business, believe it or not, even though we have over 450 clients, companies. We're working with everybody. We understand the circumstances. If there are over advances created by virtue of these incredible times, we'll term them out. We'll figure out a way when this is over to make it reasonable and workable for our clients to continue. I mean, this is not a situation where you turn around and call in the debt and say, all or nothing. Nobody can do that today. But my whole premise here on how we're going to get through this is through collaboration. If we don't collaborate with the brands, with the retailers, and all the way around, we're not going to make it. And I think the retailers have to hear that loud and clear. They need to be more collaborative. The brands are certainly willing. So I think that's the answer, Alan, that it's unprecedented. We're going to need to work everything out specifically based on the needs of each client. There's no formula for this.
Got it. Thank you for the answer. Appreciate it.
And Alan, just what are you seeing in this crazy time, as Maria alluded to, that is expected and unexpected? And if you kind of harken back to the genesis of MMG, how does this kind of compare and contrast?
Well, that's going to take a lot of time to respond, because it is such a major event in our lifetime. I don't think anyone, possibly going back to World War II, has seen anything of this magnitude. And World War II was not fought in this country. This is the first time, I believe, that the American population as a whole is experiencing an event of this magnitude. We've never been through it, right? Mm-hmm. And so many companies were started post 9/11, or even in many cases post the recession. So they have not experienced a downturn like this. I was just thinking a couple of days ago how just in February we were going from a supply side problem because China was offline and not shipping, to now having a demand side problem and with nobody buying. So mm-hmm. It's we're being hit from both sides. It's very traumatic, obviously, for the industry, and I don't think anybody really knows where this is going to go at this point or how long it's going to take. But what we're telling our people, and I'm sure everybody's getting the same advice, is you got to hunker down for the long term, preserve cash for as long as you possibly can, and look forward to coming out of the other side of this thing, hopefully in a couple of months. I just read Manny. There was a little interview about Manny Shiriko this morning in the paper. And he talked about China already coming back online at retail in some of his brands, which I thought was actually kind of encouraging. That he was seeing a resurgence, and hope that sometime in June or July he would see a significant resurgence in business, at least in Asia. And so we're following kind of the same path. I'm being optimistic about how things will start to look towards the middle or latter part of the summer.
Yeah. So, to follow on that, China, what we see coming out of China, the early readings, it is optimistic. And if there is a silver lining, it's looking at China and wondering and saying, is that applicable in the US? Is that applicable in Europe? What other silver linings do you see coming out of COVID-19?
From my perspective, there are going to be significant changes in the way brands, vendors, designers view their futures. We have been so focused on top line growth and on e-commerce growth, and we haven't really been focused on the fundamentals of building a strong business and staying in that business as a career. And I think there's going to be a lot more attention to building a sound foundation for businesses as opposed to the focus on just growing top line and selling or in getting an investor or something of that sort. And these are fundamental business principles that really should be adhered to. And those who have been more conservative and not overproduced product and not been had not exercised discrimination with regard to how many doors they sell and who they sell to, they're hurting more than those who are less focused on top line. So I think we're going to see a change there. And I think we're going to see a major change in the way stores define seasonality and promotions. So, and these are very positive things. So I am really comforted only in believing that when this is all over, which it will be at some point, we know that, there will be fundamental changes to the way we perceive business for small business and for entrepreneurs and for, when I say small business in apparel, it's anywhere up to maybe 100 billion in volume, so it's not so small.
Right.
That's what I'm referring to.
Allan?
So, couldn't have been said better, Gary. I think our industry, to a great extent, has been a very top-line driven business. On a personal level, I always felt that the line that said gross profit dollars was the most important line on a company's P&L, because that's what pays the bills. It's not the top line. But historically, we've lived in a very entrepreneurial industry. And I've always said that next to candy stores, we kind of live in one of the world's worst capitalized businesses. Our typical fashion business skates on very thin ice when it comes to its capital base, and in many cases can't weather a downturn. And I'm not talking about a downturn of this magnitude, but even in the day-to-day business that we live in, getting a significant chargeback could have a very meaningful impact on a company. So to Gary's point, I think that what's going to happen is that we're going to see companies looking to build their gross margin lines, maintain their expenses better, hopefully build their capital base to a point where they can sustain a downturn again, not of this magnitude. But I also think, to Gary's point, that seasonality is going to change. We are an over-inventoried industry. There's way too much inventory bouncing around the system globally, quite frankly. And there's no reason for it. So if people start to run their businesses a little more conservatively and try to understand the importance of managing their balance sheet and the importance of managing their P&L and not trying to ship the last unit out the door, it's going to be a game changer for our business.
Allan, just to add to what you said, I'm also hearing and seeing for the upcoming, when things reopen, when the marketplace reopens, brands and designers telling retailers, I'm cutting back my orders. I'm not shipping you more than you can sell. And I don't want you coming back to me with markdown requests and chargebacks and swaps. Buy what you need and don't come back to me. I mean, I can't survive another promotional season after all of this. So I see brands really changing the way they're perceiving the marketplace and how they want to sell into this new marketplace when it reopens.
Gary, wasn't there already a move though with this increased focus by brands on sustainability to rethink the volume, to rethink kind of the circular economy? I feel like we were maybe just kind of, in inning one on that, and maybe we emerged kind of inning three. So that's one question. Then secondly, with a lot of unsold inventory and it currently aging in all of these stores, what do you think happens if we kind of emerge, let's say, on Allan's timeline? What happens to all that inventory?
Well, spring, summer is going to be a free-for-all for the consumer, which is not such a bad thing. We all know that this Q2 is a lost quarter for everybody in the world, basically. So we'll clean out the spring, summer merchandise. Everybody's going to have to find ways to liquidate this inventory because there's going to be a ton of it. What I would like to see, and from my conversations with multiple CEOs at the retailers we all know so well, they are looking to clean this out and bring in fall later and at full price. So we don't want to see a huge overlap where the stores have massive sales going on with spring summer goods while fall merchandise is coming in. Right. So everybody needs to push the delivery dates further out and bring merchandise in the appropriate time for the consumer. So another change we're going to see is see now, buy now, wear now become a real retail reality. It's been a consumer reality for years now, but retail hasn't caught up. So I think we're going to see that.
It's about time for that, Gary.
It really is. As far as sustainability, the focus on that will never go away because of how imperiled the world is environmentally. Right now it's survival. That's a different level of survival concerns, and we'll get back to those. And I think by shipping less and by being more cautious and careful about what we cut, how much product we cut, and how carefully we distribute it, that will add to the sustainability concerns. It will help them. It will enhance a better attitude to the market. So I think it all goes hand in hand once we're back up and running.
So if I could add one thing to Gary's comments about the sell-off of inventory, I'm going to be a little self-serving if I may for one moment, because there's definitely going to be some inventory left to be given away. And as people on this call know that I'm very active with a charity called Delivering Good. We've been around for 35 years. One portion of it was started almost 15 years ago. We have a great deal of experience in how to distribute product in times like this. So we've got people, we have a full staff working. We're constantly getting donors, donations of product now as we're speaking on the phone. We've been very active. So Delivering Good has a website. It's deliveringgood.org. And we would love to see as much donations as we can. And we will proudly place that product around the United States at over 700 agencies.
Hey, Allan, I have a quick question for you. And Delivering Good is an amazing organization, and we should all support it in whatever way we can. What changes do you think, kind of from an MMG perspective, will we see in terms of the competitive landscape moving ahead? And you don't have to name companies, but if you think about kind of sectors of winners and losers, and how do we maybe get retailers to finally work together in this new reality?
Well, I think a lot of that's going to depend on the strength of his vendor structure. Part one of your question, what we're receiving are a number of calls from large organizations who are large, well-capitalized organizations who are telling us they're here for the long haul. And coming out of this, when the fog starts to clear, they would like us to show them opportunities of companies that they can acquire, because everybody's going to take a hit in volume somewhere. The larger companies are going to rebuild that revenue line and rebuild that gross margin line. So there will be opportunities. The larger companies who have the kind of impact and relationships at the senior management level with retailers are going to have to push their weight around a little bit. This can't keep going on. It's been very much a one-sided street where the retailers have dominated, and what goes on with vendors. We can see what just happened with the terms that were imposed on our industry. I think it's good coming out of this event. I think hopefully we're going to look for more partnerships and a more collegial kind of an environment between the vendor structure and the retail structure.
So how do you differentiate winners from losers today? What do you look at? Do you look at brand strength? Do you look at their online penetration? And how much does that matter today? Capital structure, what are you looking for?
Maria, I want to go back to one thing that Gary said, if I could, before. That's the type of business that will come out of this once things start to get back to normal. There are too many companies that had started in the last 5 to 10 years that were more concerned with top line growth, raising money, and positioning the company for a sale at some ridiculous multiple. It wasn't so much focused on product, it was focused on technology. In many cases, these companies were just copying other brands. Companies have to have a reason to exist. The product needs a point of view. and the value needs to be there. I think those are the fundamentals that companies need to keep in mind when either remaining in business or starting a new company. It's the product that matters, and it's the point of view and reason to exist that matters. Beyond that, of course, you need a strong balance sheet. You need to be running a profitable business, all the fundamentals of a business. But clearly, you got to have a reason to exist.
I mean, you're so right, Alan. Product is what drives our industry. If you can't fool the consumer in the end, no matter how much hype and smoke and mirrors you create around a brand, if the product is not needed, if it's not good, if it's not value to the consumer, you can't sell it. People need to refocus on making the best product possible. And part of that change back to kind of the roots of the industry will come when retailers and brands together have reasonable expectations of one another. We've been forcing product. We've been delivering so many times a year as if we're competing with fast fashion, and this is not fast fashion. It's a different mentality, and I think you're so right in saying product is everything. You need the structure around it to survive, but without the product, you might as well not try.
With some of the strength we've seen, and I think it's changed the landscape of the industry with all the D2C brands, how do you see them performing in this environment, and have they been able to adapt more quickly? And what do you think will be their role going forward?
It really depends upon what they're selling. I mean, there are some brands selling luxury items that you're only going to wear if you go out to a fancy restaurant or something of that sort. So they could be DTC, but not have the right product for this kind of environment. Right now, people want comfort clothing. They want things they can wear at home if they're going to buy anything at all. They want useful things. They want slippers and so on. So there is no consensus regarding the fate of a DTC customer, a DTC brand today. It's really contingent upon the product category they're in. But I am hearing from retailers who now have a significant component of their business devoted to DTC. And some of the major chains are telling me that if 30% of their business outside of brick and mortar has become direct-to-consumer business, they're maintaining something like 40 to 50% of that during this crisis. So if you can, do the math, maybe half of what they used to do or less, they're still seeing those revenues. So those revenues are really important. They're not getting revenue from anywhere else. So those companies that have had strong DTC businesses with the right product, and those companies that are strong on their sales representatives, that have great sales associates, whether it's Saks or Neiman's or Bergdorf's or Nordstrom, those sales associates are still able to bring in a lot of revenue to these stores. So the direct-to-consumer, and that is direct-to-consumer, the direct-to-consumer component has been quite important. Small brands don't have it. They don't have access to that market. So we're relying upon the shop ops, the Net-a-Porters, and all the majors that do have a strong DTC business.
Alan, what do you, from that perspective, as we see, let's just say the landscape change, and whether that's through insolvency or other unattractive words, how do you think we see some of these mashups, Alan, as we go forward?
So I think that, again, adding to Gary's point, I think that there's going to be a weeding out, obviously, over the coming months as to who survives and who doesn't. On the D2C front, there are a lot of companies who obviously have been operating a significant deficit as they try to acquire eyeballs and market share and pay significant amounts of money for their marketing costs. A lot of these guys are not going to survive. On the other hand, I've been using a word called convergence for the past 4 years, meaning that the companies that have been around for a long time, I call them legacy companies, will have an opportunity to acquire online D2C companies. there's been a problem over the last 3 or 4 years because values, I should say expected values on the D2T side were very high, and the expectations were very high, and consequently, a number of the older economy companies couldn't afford to acquire D2C companies. Those values are about to come down significantly. And I think we're going to see a marriage between both sides and a convergence of the older line companies and brands and the D2C companies, which will give them the technology they need to go forward. So I'm kind of optimistic about what's going to happen over the next couple of months, 4 to 6 months with these companies. I also see, you know, we're sitting here, I'm seeing Gary's office, you're seeing my home, I'm seeing your homes. Well, you have some backdrops, so maybe not. But this experience, you know, like somebody said the other day that the Z and Gen Z was all about Zoom. This is teaching us a lot about how we can communicate without having to go to our office and how to be able to run our businesses remotely. And I think that this is a game changer for a lot of people who are not going to want to commute 5 days a week, getting dressed in business clothes, who will now feel very comfortable contributing to their businesses remotely. Yeah, and I think that's going to change the way people dress, the way people buy things. This is going to be a game changer at so many different levels that we're just beginning to appreciate.
Yeah, Alan, that's the real question that I've been grappling with. What is the consumer going to look like when this is over? What are they going to want? What are they going to be comfortable doing? Are they going to want to shop in department stores? Are they going to want to go to venues where there are thousands or hundreds of people? Are they going to be shell-shocked? Obviously, we'll all be shell-shocked, but is it going to permanently change the way the consumer approaches what they buy and how they buy it? And I don't have an answer to that, but certainly it's going to change things. We just don't know how. Are people going to be madly rushing out to finally be able to buy product again? We don't know. We don't know because the situation is so volatile at the moment. And
don't you think though, Gary and Alan, it matters how long we're in this tunnel? Because if we look at China, sales are, let's say, 80 to 90% back. There's lines out the door at the luxury goods companies. But what I do fear that because they've got, live streaming in a different way and gamification, and I think the brands are able to keep their customers more involved and probably deepen their relationship during, the time when they were in the tunnel. I guess those are some of the challenges I'm grappling with myself is, how are we unique here and how are we similar to, the positive, kind of anecdotes we've heard coming out of China so far?
Yeah, it's almost like China had a Z recovery.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that what we're hearing from China is accurate. I was speaking to some partners in Beijing on Sunday night, and Chinese individuals, not Americans, who live and work there, and they said Beijing is not open for business, and they were not as optimistic as we seem to feel their being there. I'm not sure that we're getting accurate reads from what's actually happening.
But I think Alan and I have been talking to some of the brands. So direct, I would say direct communication. We are hearing, without sharing specifics, that business is not 100%, but it's close. And it could depend by sector, but that's all right. A lot of that is through Alibaba or other platforms. And I think what we've seen from the malls, right, they've been doing a lot of, their own kind of gamification where they're giving away kind of free product, working this landlord-tenant relationship has continued to strengthen. So I think it may matter by brand, by sector of business.
Also, China is such a huge country, it's city by city as well. Shanghai might be open for business and Beijing is still shut down. And we don't know, it's just such a huge country.
Alan?
Well, certainly one of the, sorry, just to interject, one of the things that we learned, Deborah, from the, Coresight, we're on the ground there learning that they're very digitally engaged there. So during the tunnel time, the consumer has been reached out to. Nike's been doing it in their own app as well as on other social media platforms. So if one thing, if there's one difference, it's that here in the United States, many of the brands and the retailers are really not doing enough to reach out. Alan, what do you think?
Well, I think they're not. I think right now everybody's kind of hunkered down. And, you know, I watch TV at night. Most of us are watching something on TV. And actually, I'm amazed at how quickly the major advertisers have turned around and developed advertisements catering to what is happening today. And they've customized their ads. They're being very sensitive to what's going on in the environment around us. I haven't seen that from the major brands yet, because maybe if they feel it's too opportunistic at this point to be doing it, unless they have a strong D2C presence. There's no stores open, so there's no reason to advertise to go into a store to buy something. So I think that's going to take a little time. What worries me with the consumer is what we've been hearing about a possible second wave of this coming in the fall, and whether or not the consumer is actually going to be comfortable going out past the first wave and then going back into the malls in September, October, and November. I'm kind of looking down the road a little bit and saying, you know, that really concerns me. And we've been hearing a lot about that. So the consumer has to be comfortable with leaving their home, getting in their car, and going someplace in order for this to start to revive itself. Or if not, it's going to be completely reliant on D2C.
Yeah, and it feels like it's going to be so gradual because, like, when you look at what's happening to what's happened to hospitality, I mean, it's decimated. Nobody's using the hotels. Nobody's going out, and that it's going to take a while for the consumer to be comfortable doing that. You're right, and some of that's going to come out of the healthcare industry.
Well, I think Zoom will have a lot of impact on corporate travel into the future. Zoom or things like it, because you know if you remember what happened coming out of SARS, there was the amount of travel that went to Asia was, and Deborah will remember, there was a lot less of it going on at the time. You know, business was being done just like we're doing it today, only there was no Zoom back then, so it was less sophisticated. But the opportunity of being able to commute by video hung around for a long time before people actually got back on planes and started going back to Asia. I think we're going to have a lot of that now. You know, my wife's car is coming up for renewal, her lease in September. And I said to my wife the other day, you'll have your pick of the litter come June, because people are going to want to move inventory that's backing up right now so much all over the world. And that inventory is going to need to be relieved somehow, and it's going to be through promotions.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and ask, we have quite a queue of questions. So let me start to kick these off, and Maria and I can alternate. How do you think the luxury fashion market is going to fare once we are back? And also, one more question. Do you believe the fashion world of size, inclusivity, and diversity will be more important or less as we move forward? Good question.
Gary, take the first one, Gary.
Yeah.
Your market.
From a luxury perspective, the luxury consumer has been the most devoted, consistent consumer in the world. And the aspirational luxury consumer as well. If luxury product purchasing continues to make people feel good and feel accomplished and feel better about what they've done and where they are, then I think it will come back very strong. It really hasn't completely gone away. They just can't go into the stores to do it. Now, this consumers may be purchasing in a different distribution channel. That remains to be seen. But I don't think the luxury consumer is going away at all. Excuse me. It's a very loyal consumer.
Deborah, could you repeat the second part of that question? It was a long time since we...
Yeah, of course. Also, one more question. Do you believe the fashion world of size, inclusivity, and diversity will be more important or less as we move forward?
More important. Certainly more important for a variety of reasons, but I think it's going to, we want to cater to a broader audience. Size diversity will help you control inventories better. So I think it's going to become much more important, and because it's also it allows you to focus your marketing and your customer a lot better. So I think it's going to be much more important.
I agree. I think the trend is going to continue to inclusivity. It should. It's real. I think we still have archaic attitudes in our department stores about size, breaking up of size in different departments and on different floors of the store. I mean, to me, that's just discrimination. You should have all sizes available in the same department. Why would you send a woman of a different or a man of a different size to a different floor in your store? It makes no sense to me at all. And I think brands are recognizing that size diversity is extraordinarily important to their online consumer, who would prefer not being exposed to this uncomfortable situation at retail. And retailers are starting to wake up to the fact that they've basically excluded the majority of the American population who is over a size 16.
Right.
It also,
So I think
it's also going to create a lot more brand loyalty by those who've been excluded to date.
Well, it's interesting. I talked to a few retailers who do extended sizes and kind of sizes 0 to 26. And they have said in the past month that the most popular size has been 22. And, you know, but if you think about it, right, in typical physical stores, we don't have easy access to that extended size range. So it will be interesting once we kind of, you know, emerge from all this, where some of that shopping stays online and where it moves offline, or, you know, kind of, Gary, to your point, do we see retailers rethink their physical stores?
Yeah, it's also, there are practical reasons for the brands themselves. Not all of it is choice, but when you mark and grade up beyond a 12 or a 14 or a 16, you can't apply the same formulas that you do in grading a 2 to a 6 to an 8 to a 10. Dimensions, it's not just the dimension that changes, it's distribution of body weight changes. So the silhouette changes. So it's not simply choice that people have decided not to make larger sizes. There's a lot more involved, and it's in the design side. And I think we're learning that, the industry's learning that, and I think those who digitally, particularly with all of the ability today to work in tech packs and so on, you can create designs at all sizes now. So we're going to see more and more of it. But it wasn't just a choice on the part of designers not to design for the majority of the American public.
To Gary's point, practically speaking, if you're making sizes, you know, 2 to 14 dresses, and you average the consumption, the piece goods consumption, let's say, you'll come up with a price point. So you got a single price point for all of those different sizes. Now, if you're going 16 to 22 or 16 to 24, and your fabric consumption becomes so much greater, you can't possibly average anymore, because what'll happen is the customer who's a size 2 or 4 is going to be paying a lot more money for a dress, because they have to average out to a size 22 or 24 now. So it's really complicated stuff, but there's always an answer to a problem, and it's going to get figured out.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So we have a question about what advice would you give to retailers under 100 million, how to navigate what is the new normal in terms of financing, sourcing, supply chain?
You said retailers or brands?
Let's do brands.
Well, I can speak to the brands side of this. Alan, you want to take the retailer side?
I'm fine. Okay.
I mean, it's your choice.
No, I look from the retail perspective. I come back to point of view. The store's got to have a reason to exist, and it's got to have great product. There's no reason for stores that don't have a point of view to exist in today's marketplace going forward. I think the customers will be very discriminate as to what they're looking for. They're going to want quality. They're going to want value. And, you know, I walk into stores now and I say, well, I'm not going to buy it now. I'm going to wait 4 weeks so I know it's going to be marked down. Why would I want to pay regular price today when I know this store's got a formula? Every 4 weeks it's going to go on sale. So a retailer have to change the consumer's mentality on how to manage their inventory turn, so the consumer actually feels that they're getting a legitimate value in what they want to buy and not wait for the same product to go on sale down the road. I would also say you don't have to have as many stores. To build an organization and develop top line just by opening new stores is really not necessary. You got to be much more selective in picking your sites and where you want your stores to be located, and focus on profitability, not market share.
From the brand perspective, I think we focused a bit on that earlier in the conversation. The way their relationships with the retailers they sell to are going to change, and they need to change. The brands need to take back some control over their destiny. They cannot put all the money up front into development, product creation, ship it, and then not know how much they're going to be paid in the end. It's not even fair to ask that of the brands. And I think they've realized that, because they see themselves now as victims more than anybody in this terrible environment, where retailers are just arbitrarily not paying or extending terms, and they realize how vulnerable they are. So I think the first change for brands is going to be to protect themselves, figure out what will solve the problems going forward of this vulnerable position that they've assumed over the years. And that's going to be a combination of not overbuying, not overdeveloping, really focused on product, not seasonality the way we see it now, which is just crazy, but producing the assortment of product that's appropriate for the time that you're delivering it. And re-educating the retailers as well as, here, this is what I'm offering you. It makes more sense. Please listen to me. And don't buy too much, and don't put it in locations where my product is never going to sell, and then come back to me and say, well, your sell-through was 26%, so now we have to return it. Be more discriminatory about where you distribute and how you distribute. So there's been a lot of changes on the brand side, and a lot more efforts to take control back of their own destiny because of the feel and the reality of the vulnerability they're sensing and experiencing now.
All right, I'm going to ask the last question from our Q&A list, which is long, and then I'll let Marie wrap up. Do you believe nearshoring will gain impetus in the post-COVID-19 retail environment?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been advocating it for so long. In fact, I invested and have been part of building a knitwear factory in St. Louis that was supposed to go online May 1st, and I think it still will. But there is going to be a lot more reason to onshore product. Again, it's the question of vulnerability. The brands have seen their supply chains just shut down. You have no control at all when you're producing overseas. You have more control when you're producing here, even though factories have shut down as well. But yes, I think onshoring is going to be a significant, we're going to see significant growth in that area.
Well, I think there will be growth in the area, but I think it's going to have its limitations. Price points will be a limitation. There are things that just you couldn't possibly produce economically enough to sell at Walmart, as an example, or other
right. In luxury, it's a lot more.
Right. I think luxury, you've got a much better shot in luxury. And the other question is, will we have a labor force here to support it? Right now, I don't think that's the case. So I think there will be a significant amount of onshoring coming back, but to be repetitive, it's going to have its limitations, and it's going to be driven by, to a great extent, I believe, technology. We recently saw at a trade show a machine that can knit a sweater seamlessly.
That's exactly what we did in St. Louis, Alan.
Right.
And that's why
that type of innovation, the answer is yes.
And that's why it's cost effective as well. One person operates this huge machine that can turn out so many garments. It becomes cost effective. In addition, I know you said the labor force, we're worried about it. We have a tremendous number of unskilled laborers who can easily be trained, retrained as they were initially in the making of garments. We just can't do it in the major urban centers where rents are too high and cost of living is too high. We have to find regional opportunities where there's transportation outlets, where there's some central location, like St. Louis, for example, where you can easily distribute at low cost. Remember, we don't have There's no duty on goods that are made here. The transportation costs are minimal. It's trucking. They're minimal. So it's really the labor and the rent. And if we can find locations around the country, and there are so many, and even in every major city, that are depressed and vacant, and we work with the governments, it's not at all unfeasible to regenerate a manufacturing business in this country.
Well said.
Yeah, on that note, that's a very positive ending to a conversation. What a great way to go into the weekend. Thank you all for joining us. The audience, we appreciate you being here. We're going to post the video soon. And Allan and Gary, we really appreciate you. You've been very insightful. Thanks for all your comments, and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks for having us. Have a great weekend. Stay healthy, stay safe, everybody.
Yeah, thanks.
So long.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.